You catch me in the back of the saggy roofed Accord, and essentially you would have seen in the last episode, or one of the last episodes that's out, that we had to do an oil change for the MOT, clean everything up and get everything sorted. However, since going to the MOT, I have failed on a couple of things. Besides some tyre wear, which is pretty natural, the repair immediately defects are the exhaust. So even though we replaced a section for the cat, there are cracks that we didn't see on the exhaust. So in this video, I'll be showing you how to weld those back up. And then I also failed on a steering rack gaiter, missing or no longer, prevents grease of dirt on offside front. So I've also bought one of those. I'll show you the part numbers of what the parts store gave me, and I'm going to crack on with the jobs. We also have a slight overheating issue, so I'll also cover that in the video, but let's get to it. So first of all, we're just going to get to the target area, which is, you can see just there in the center. I'm doing this just old school car park style. Let's get to it. What I do like about these Hondas is this brace. So we're very easily able to jack up from the center point and then look to see what needs taking off. I imagine a couple of exhaust hangers, and then I think there's an exhaust clamp to put it all together. As I suspected, got an exhaust hanger here, which is hopefully going to come off easy, but by the little, I don't know what you call these things, clamps that are just here, not too sure. And there's one on the back side, so there's basically two on each, and then a center clamping point, which hopefully, fingers crossed, isn't welded, because otherwise we'll have a little bit of trouble. But look at it from underneath. I'm probably just going to take that top mounted sort of bodged exhaust bracket off and leave the bottom one on, because this thing's more rusty than the car itself. Hopefully the back ones come off easily, and then just over to the center clamp. So as you can see, there's been some impact, so I imagine where this is blown through is because of that. But I've just got a deep 10mm, but this socket is super crusty. So hopefully it comes off without any casualties, but I don't know. I was really hoping to not make a video about this and hope to make a video about the MR2, sorry, about the Accord passing and then just working straight back to the MR2. But yeah, let's finish this off. Get this off and then start welding. So unfortunately, we were not without a casualty. One that I don't know if it'll affect us or not. It depends how these threads start to chase. But yeah, that's the current situation. I'm sure we have another nut somewhere. So as long as there's still enough distance on this, we should be fine. If not, we'll have to try something else to get it on and off. But not my main concern at the moment. Now, hopefully, there are just two sections that will slide apart. Yeah. Now I should be able to disconnect the engine mounts and then lower them. Now it's just disconnected in this centerpiece. As you can see, there's a lot of carbon buildup, and then I can take off the engine mounts up there and the one above me. And it's actually a nice day to work on the car, which is pretty cool. Now that's not bad at all. That's all on. It's all been grinded. We're just finishing making the custom piece to go inside this bracket. Now I'm having to take a bit of bar and tap a thread onto it, because we now need to make a custom piece to go on this bracket again to just pass this MOT. Let's do this. Now with some custom made bolt to hold that on, that should have threaded through nicely. And then we just did a little TIG that you would have seen there on the Rtech, just to go onto the top of the unit there. These Rtech welders really are insane. And then that'll go through there. And I've got some gasket maker just in case to line this, but let's try and put it back on the car. Now let's get this back on the car. So I've had to retap and dye this. It had to be shorter anyway because there was too much pressure on the length that we had. That's why it snapped as we were going through. Although I was very happy about those threads, so kind of annoyed, but take two, this time with a shorter bolt essentially. So one side so far has gone on quite nicely. The other side, because of these custom hangers, is causing me a bit of jiff. Essentially, usually there's like a little welded section on the end or something, just to make sure that when you put it on the bung it doesn't slide off, but this side doesn't have any, so it keeps sliding off. And that back one will hopefully go on and not slide off when I'm getting this new one, and then I'll line the center joint, but it's easier when the hangers are both on. Now the custom bracket and bolt is on. I know this still does look a bit dodgy. I'm going to fix that at a later date. The welds are looking great, and I'm just going to try and make sure the exhaust looks alright when it comes out the bumper. I mean, this side sits a little high, but I think it always has because, you know, hence the melting of the bumper there. But yeah, these mounts are quite tight, so I'm wondering if I need to move the mount over. I'm not too sure, but in a second I'm going to get that mount nice and tight in the center. Now that's out the way and done for. The car sounds a lot quieter, but in a good way, that it's not blowing. Everything's back on. The last iteration of that bolt works. Turned out we had the threads too short, well, too long that it snaps, then too short, then again too long, so last iterations worked. Now we're going to move on to the electrics for the fan, diagnosing that, and then on to the driver's side TV boot. Right, I'm not going to do the wiring yet, but we're going to move on to the CV boot first. So I'm pretty sure this is just a universal boot, but it was recommended by the parts company. But essentially we're just going to measure these threads here, take note of how long we've got for our tracking and alignment. But this boot, if you can see in there, is yeah, ignore this tower that needs stripping and redoing. I know the whole car does, but look at that. The boot is just, there's nothing in there. There's no grease left, which will explain why the steering's been a bit bad. So let's take this bolt off and go from there. Just made a note of the distances from the top to the bottom of this nut, and now we're going to get this off. So turns out they've given me the CV boot, but it wasn't actually meant to be the CV boot. It was meant to be the steering rack gaiter. I did ask for the steering rack gaiter, but they've given me the CV boot, and then I just blanked it and thought, oh well, they've given me the right thing. But I think we're going to try and make this work. I mean, it would fit lovely if it was over there, but, or down here, but it's not. So tell me in the comments below if that affects anything or not, but let's just keep trying to get this bolt off and go from there. So yeah, turns out the person has sent us the wrong thing, which is not going to work, or given us the wrong thing. So we found one. So far I have disconnected and started unthreading here. I've now got a 17mm that I had to torque off of the ball joint. Then we will be able to remove the boot, but we're gonna have to go on a last minute journey to get the correct part. So frantically watch us try and go to that now. It's been a while since I've driven one of these, especially with a pink steering wheel flashing. We've arrived at the last minute store to hopefully get this universal boot. Now, just gonna say this, I've been told the universal ones aren't great, but I'm in a sticky situation. I need to pass my MOT, and yes, I will keep an eye to make sure that it isn't leaking, and I also did buy extra grease so that if it does leak and we need to do something about it, I can sort that issue out. So fingers crossed Lex comes back with a part, and we can then finish the job in as much daylight as we can get.
So we just got back from Euro Car Parts and we got these universal, oh there's the picture, like universal ones. So we only need the one side, but now we have a spare one just in case. I don't think this is like the exact size, but should do the trick. Let's get it on the car.
So the top bolt here has been removed. Just going to give it a little tap to get it out, and then we should be able to untwist the tie rod and then get the old boot off. And with just a couple of light taps on the side, it's freed us loose. So then we should be able to untwist the rest of this, which should hopefully give us enough clearance to just get the boot over this bolt. So there we are. So just using my screwdriver and twisting the boot round, this little spring's come off, but you might have something that looks more like one of these clamps. Either way, it's the same sort of principle when you're doing it. And then we should be able to rather pull this through or cut it off. Because of the state ours is in, we could probably just cut it off, but I'll see if I can pull it off normally first. Oh, oh, well, that grease is, it's, let's just say, seen better days in that joint there. So that I'm gonna re-grease the same time, because that is stiff as anything. It's more like a resin. And safe to say that there was little to nothing left in there. And if you look on the splines, yeah, there's nothing left. Safe to say that I needed to replace this. Let's compare to the new one. So the new one is slightly different, but as you said, it's a universal one. I'm gonna load it up with grease, and I'm sure it'll be fine. The only thing I'm a little concerned about is the diameter being a little smaller, but I'm sure that center ring will clip in instead of the outer ring, as it's sort of made to fit both. The annoying bit is this little guy, which we're gonna have to figure out how to get on there. And the diameter of this screw hole is, let's just say it's not that. So we're gonna try this method, and it might work, it might not. Essentially, I've turned this inside out. I'm gonna put the retaining clip for the one side over and through, so we already have one waiting for us on the other side. If not, don't worry, we do have backup clamps that we can just tighten on with a screwdriver if needed. We're gonna get it on most of the way there. We're then gonna fill all of the grease there and roll it out. But we're also gonna use this little cup thing to expand this over. Although what I don't get is how it's gonna get, I guess it holds on this side, right?
I think so.
On this little washer?
I don't really know.
But I think we're gonna struggle. I don't know. Let's just this is so weird to film on camera. So the weird cup thing has let us get the boot partly on. And then I think we just roll it. Is that gonna, yeah, that's gonna put it around the right way now, as we roll it on. Very slowly, but you know. This is such an interesting process. Now, I don't know if this is the most efficient way or not, so, you know, let us know in the comments below if you think this is the most efficient way or not. And now I should just be able to slide this over, and then we're going to go back and fill it with grease in a bit, but you know, we're just going to make sure it's got like all the air in and that it's jiggling around correctly. This is a little tricky in the dark. There we go. And then we're on.
Okay, nice.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
That was, I think, one of the easy parts of that. So we're going to put hella grease in here. The reason we're going to put quite a lot is because this has obviously been leaking for quite a while. What I'm going to get Lex to do in a second is go and turn the steering wheel so that it pulls it in through the splines. This should be enough, to be honest with you, from what I've put on, but I just want to make sure enough goes into the inside. Now there is some sag, and I will be replacing this with the OEM one probably at some point soon. However, we've checked it, and Lex is turning the steering wheel one way, the other way, nothing slipping, no grease is coming out loose or anything like that. So now it's time to put on this little guy, which has seen better days by the looks of it. But essentially, threading this guy back on. Which pretty much all I need to do is match the nut here, and I shouldn't have to move anything else. It should just reset back here. Although I should have probably counted the turns and everything, but this is where it was before. It seems pretty solid, so I'm just gonna get this back in. Now the boot's back on, our joint here is back on. So next in the morning, because it's pretty dark out here, we're going to move on to the wiring of the fans, where I'm going to wire in a fan switch to help us out, because the car has a little bit of an overheating issue due to some wires messing up. So we're back in the daytime, and I've got all my electrical connectors in hope I can at least wire a switch onto these fans so that when we're trying to get the car hot, or if we want the fans to force on, that we can. So let's get the bonnet popped and get going. I can't remember yesterday if I showed or not, but when connecting a power to at least the left hand fan, I need to just double check on the right hand fan. When I activated through just 12 volt through my little machine, the fan was running, so it's not a fault in the fan. However, there are some cooked wires down here, which is probably what's causing the issue. But for today, we're just going to wire a switch in instead, because we know something's up with rather the thermostat or the whole wiring itself. We don't have time for that, so let's try and fix it on a switch for now. See, I've wanted to have the switch on the car anyway, so that when we're pushing the car for very high temperatures, etc., on track or anything like that, not that this car is really a track car, we can flick a switch and force the rads to cool down quicker, faster. But also if we're leaving the car idling or in traffic, especially with old cars, it's good to make sure that they don't overheat like this one's been doing. So let's get wiring. Thankfully the Accord seems to have the biggest engine bay in the world, so it's nice and easy for me to rest all the tools in and get to the fans nice and easy. I'm just going to grab a screwdriver, a couple of pairs of pliers just to get these connectors off. But essentially we're looking for this top fan connector because we don't need the rest of the wiring loom, that's cooked. So I'm going to release this one, and then it'll be the same on this side. We only need this top piece, which we're going to join in the middle and make sure it doesn't touch the manifold, which has clearly been happening before. So from my previous, I know, yes, it's Halfords, it's cheap, but I sort of need that at the moment. I don't need anything super crazy. So yeah, essentially I think this wire should be good enough for what we're doing. Since it's 17, I might actually downgrade the fuse. I was going to put a 20 in there, but we'll let that in a moment. But essentially I'm going to have a fuse bridge connector, an overload switch, and it's important that you have all three of these because otherwise it will just pop the fuse every time you press the button. And then I'm going to need my crocodile clips, which are in a bag over there, just to test everything works before actually wiring anything up. Oh yeah, and some electrical tape too to clean everything up at the end. We have an abundance of it. In terms of tools, I have this wire probe, which is not necessary, but it's good to test your connections before you get too deep into it. Crocodile clips, some just cheap wire crimpers, and some good wire strippers. The reason I've got good wire strippers is I hate stripping wires with old sort of blunt objects like this. Let me mock up the wiring and then I'll explain it through to you. So first connection I'm going to need is something that joins them together. So I'm mocking this up with crocodile clips. Essentially we've got the negative on one side to the negative, the positive on this side to the positive. All that is doing is it's a transfer of electricity between the two fans. So it's not going to cause any jumping or bridging. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hook this tester up here and essentially pop it to the 12 volt. What it will do is it will regulate a safe amount, a small amount of electricity that we can test to see if both the fans come on at the same time by the push of a button. I'll explain it as I show it because it's easier to see, it makes more sense. So I had to change the grounding point, I hope you can hear me over the noise of the engine, from this one over there, rather than to the next connector. All we need is a power going through and I can ground this somewhere else. But as I press this on the live, you'll see the fans come on. Which is, as you can probably hear me a lot better now, exactly what we want. So by forcing the power, it tells us that if we do one of those fuse bridges, if we put power to one side and then a connector from one to the other, it should let us kick them in via a switch. So let's get wiring to that switch. As I said, this is not a permanent fix. I will wire it correctly into a fuse board. However, we have the positive running through to a fuse jump, which is a 20 amp. Negatives attached to the car. I've then got the other side of the positive on one end of the switch, the other side of the positive going to the connector, which is then bridged across for power for the other one, which is then grounded. And then I have my overcharge at the moment, which is very important you have an overcharge point, otherwise it'll just keep blowing fuses, just on this latch at the minute. But now that I know that this works, I can label up what does what on the switch, because this is just a cheap switch with nothing labeled on, and I can wire everything in nicely. So I'll show you. With the car off, I just press the button. And the fans come on nicely. Well, currently one is. I'll have to figure out what's going on with the other, to be honest. Just use this little bit of wire to add an extra ground over to this point, and it worked like a dream. Now I have to just make it look pretty, which is the fun part. So I had a bit of an issue, so I had to get the voltmeter out just to test what was going on. So our original test worked. However, what I found is that the bolts they've used here, here, and here are not conducted. They're not reaching a negative, essentially. So all of these ground wires I put in aren't working. So I've got some hardware that does react. I'm gonna switch it around and fingers crossed it works. So a couple more sections of testing, I found that grounding off of these bolts is not going to work, and they need to be chassis mounted grounds. I have a grounding point here, which I might be able to make this stretch. I can make something work over here, hopefully, and then I'm going to have to do the same on this hole here, and fingers crossed the new grounds on the chassis instead will work. And just by using chassis mounted ground points instead, I know it doesn't look pretty for now, but it'll get me through what I need. The fans kick on. So now the fans kick on, I can get it through MOT and then give myself a little more time, because of work outside of this work, to fix it properly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wire it into the blank switch here, so that if we're in traffic or if we're getting the car hot, as I said, at shows and things, we've got options to flick a switch and stop her from overheating. Now the next segment is going to be recorded probably when I've had the second MOT retest, or the first MOT retest. So let's see. I really hope I don't have to spend like another basically £50 to have another MOT. Now before I forget to record a couple of clips, the Accord has, I think I can show some of this, but it's passed. And only advisories on the tyres, which I knew one of those tyres needed changing anyway, but I'm super duper happy that the car passed. I had no doubts that it would. But if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. And let us know if you've had trouble passing an MOT before, because I imagine the majority of the people watching this have had at least a couple of things go or not go correctly whilst getting your car MOT'd. And for more content along these lines, usually every Tuesday. So stay tuned for that. And thanks for watching once again.